People's House. My name is Sarah Copeland, Kansas, and my day job is the owner of a small cafe in Bradford on Main Street. And in my spare time, I represent Bradford Fairleigh and West Fairleigh in the Vermont House. When I'm here, I'm co-chair of the Climate Solutions Caucus, and as you saw, there are a handful of us who are here and very excited to be with you today. In my role as a business owner, citizen legislator, and mother of 3 daughters who are about your age, I have to say that I am so glad you are here. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that you took time out of your day today and the hours and hours that were put into preparing for this day. Thank you so much for being here. This is an incredible event. All the time and the hard work that you put in, and I know that for some of you this is your first trip to the State House, and I hope that many of you will be back in future years as elected leaders yourselves. Some of you know the Speaker of the House, Mitzi Johnson, made special accommodations to make sure that you could meet here in this House chamber, the People's House. And unfortunately, the Speaker is away out of state at a conference, but she asked me if I could share some words from her. The Speaker writes, "Welcome. I'm thrilled that you've come together today in the People's House to discuss the next steps in tackling our shared climate crisis. I'm so sorry that I'm out of state this weekend and cannot join you. There is so much good work in our state for which we can be proud. Vermont consistently ranks as one of the lowest carbon producers in the country, both overall and per capita. We have a solid foundation for our solar energy industry and an opportunity to keep growing that sector to benefit our environment and our economy. Our electric grid provides some of the cleanest power in the country. But our emissions are moving in the wrong direction, and we must do better now. Conversations throughout our communities, including today's Youth Climate Congress, will culminate in a strong package of legislation that will help Vermonters do our part to address this crisis, as well as provide examples to other states who are looking to be part of the Coalition for Progress. Thank you for your leadership in saving our planet. Thank you for your part in turning the tide so that inaction becomes a bigger political liability than making change. Citizenship is not a spectator sport. Your presence here today shows Vermont that today's youth is not willing to sit quietly and wait. Your time on this issue, your passion, and your engagement in our democracy makes a difference. And I look forward to hearing from you on today's outcome and working together for a better future. Sincerely, Speaker Mitzi Johnson. Before I turn the gavel over to your co-chairs, I want to share a quick story about why I'm so excited to be here today. And the story isn't about climate, at least not at the outset. I've served in this chamber for 15 years. And in the 15 years, I've seen the impossible become possible. Whether it was the passage of full marriage equality, the restoration of our waterways, which were poisoned by decades of poor planning and ignorance, or the elimination of single-use plastics in our state, hard work by a few grew into the commitment of many and the support of the majority. For most of my time here, I have fought for sensible gun safety legislation, and for most of that time, the fight was at a stalemate. And to be honest, it was a stalemate that had been around for decades before I came here. And it wasn't just Vermont, this was status quo across the country. For as many proponents of gun safety legislation, there were just enough people who opposed any limits, and they would fight back. Elected leaders would sense a stalemate, and nothing changed. But then something did happen. In fact, 3 things happened in very short succession. First, on Valentine's Day that year, there was a horrible tragedy in Parkland, Florida, where a gunman killed 17 students and injured 17 more. What made this school shooting different than the sadly dozens of massacres that had gone before it was the surviving students. They banded together, they went to their state capital, they demanded change, and they won. Second, a few days after Parkland, there was a very, very close call here in Vermont. And it appears through an alert community member that Fairhaven High School avoided a shooting of its own. And it was terrifying to many of us. But an amazing thing happened after Fairhaven too. This building was flooded with young people asking, demanding, urging that those of us who are elected to protect their future actually do something about gun violence. And for the first time in decades, modest gun safety legislation was passed by the House and the Senate, and the governor, to his credit, forgot about his NRA rating, and he signed Vermont's first gun safety measures into law. The third thing happened that I want to tell you about, and this is going to sound much more familiar. A 15-year-old girl heard about the Parkland students and how they refused to go to school, and it gave her an idea. She decided to go on a school strike of her own, and at first she wasn't able to get any friends to join her, and maybe even her parents weren't supporting her. But then an amazing thing happened, and what started as one girl going on strike has become a global movement with millions of people across the globe participating, including you sitting in these seats here today. And that, of course, was Greta Thunberg. And she was inspired by a tragedy to organize young people, and it's working. It's working. Look at how many people we have filling this chamber today. And I love one of Greta's sayings, "No one is too small to make a difference." That applies to each of us individually. That applies to our little state of Vermont that has led the nation in so many ways throughout history. Today, you're going to do great things. Today, you are going to pass a declaration that will urge your elected governor and legislature to work together to make meaningful progress in stemming climate change. Now, without further ado, I am going to pass the gavel to your chairs, Lily and Evelyn, to call this Climate Congress to order.
Our first order of business is a land recognition from Hope Petrero, a senior at Montpelier High School and an officer of the Vermont Youth Lobby.
Together, we acknowledge that today's Youth Climate Congress convenes on occupied land stolen from the Abenaki people and Wabanaki Confederacy, whom have stewarded this land for generations. We recognize that around the world, Indigenous peoples are among the first to face direct consequences of climate change, even though they contribute to climate change the least. The fight against climate change is a fight for Indigenous communities and their political and economic empowerment. And Indigenous voices must ring loud and clear in the political process and public discourse on combating climate change. Please join me for a short moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. Hello again. Thank you for coming. I'm Lily Platt. I'm a senior at Harwood Union High School, and I'm an officer of the Vermont Youth Lobby.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Seidner. I'm a senior from Burton Academy, and I'm also an officer of the Vermont Youth Lobby.
We are your co-chairs for today's first ever Youth Climate Congress. We're now going to do a roll call. Please stand up and cheer when you hear your school's name called. Thank you all for joining us today. We're lucky to be here in this historic building and gorgeous room. I'd like to thank Speaker Mitzi Johnson, President Pro Tem of the Senate Tim Ash, and the Sergeant at Arms Janet Miller for accommodating our Youth Climate Congress in the State House this afternoon. work that we're about to do together. Today we're going to agree on climate action measures that this legislative body can make law of the state when session begins in January. We have to do this because we are living in a climate crisis and not enough is being done about it. Vermont's greenhouse gas emissions are rising, while emissions from all of our neighboring states are going down. This is not a hoax. Governor Scott and the legislature need to treat the climate crisis as the crisis that it is. Our future and the Vermont way of life will be damaged if we don't act. There is hope. If Vermont takes action now, we can reduce climate pollution. The work we are doing today will set an example for Governor Scott and the legislature of what comprehensive climate legislation can and should look like. In a minute, my co-chair, Evelyn Seidner, is going to take us through our agenda for the day. But remember, this is just the beginning of our battle for bold climate action in Vermont.
Today will be filled with important discussion and active involvement in our state's future. We are almost done with the introductions, and next up are the subcommittee sessions. During this time, we will be finalizing our climate declaration. This will include voting within your subcommittee, which we will do by giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down. After meeting in committee, we will reconvene in the House chambers to hear our keynote speaker, Representative Becca White. Committees will briefly report out what they have accomplished, and we will do a read-around of the finalized resolution. After this, we will vote. Lily and I will then have some closing remarks and final thoughts. We will take a photo and eat some ice cream, and the day will already be done. We are now transitioning into committee. Transportation will meet in room 30. Energy and heating will be in room 32. Agriculture will meet in 31. Both just transition and climate justice will meet in the cafeteria. And the declaration committee will meet in room 33. These room numbers are also on your agendas if you need a reminder. We have a lot to accomplish today, so let's get started. Thanks again for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm sorry that Bernie can't be here in person, but I know he'd be so heartened to see this room full of young people engaged in the halls of power. I would like to share the following message from him. It reads, "Dear friends, I am sorry my schedule does not allow me to join you, but I want to thank all the young people participating in the Vermont Youth Climate Congress. I am proud of your commitment to learning about and engaging in the legislative process to spur on action. To my mind, climate change is the single greatest existential threat we face. If we do not drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the already disastrous effects of global warming will get much worse by mid-century. And as you know all too well, your generation will be most affected, as well as others who had the least to do with causing the problem, including low-income and vulnerable communities all across America and the world. While climate change is an enormous challenge to address, now is not the time to despair. Instead, we must take bold action. We must invest in energy efficiency and renewable energy and radically transform our energy system. And perhaps most importantly, we must organize and engage at all levels of government. Please know that I will continue to fight for strong climate legislation in Washington. I am a proud co-sponsor of the Green New Deal resolution, a bold proposal that outlines a 10-year effort to protect our environment while also ensuring high-wage jobs, resilient infrastructure, and environmental justice for all of our communities. I will do my part, but I have always believed that real change does not take place on Capitol Hill. It takes place in grassroots America. It takes place when millions of people come together and demand action. This is exactly what young Vermonters and youth around the world have been doing, whether by rallying at the Capitol, taking to the streets for the global climate strike, or coming together today to craft a climate resolution. I am very proud of the tremendous leadership you have shown, and I hope you'll continue to stay engaged and move us toward a more sustainable and just future. Keep up the great work. Sincerely, Bernie Sanders, U.S. Senator.
Thank you very much, Ms. Crow.
Now it's time for our keynote speaker. One of the coolest things about her is that while she is a Vermont State Representative and has served on the Hartford Select Board, she's younger than some of the delegates here today. She has a background working for VPIRG and Suncommon, and when the legislature isn't in session, she now works for Efficiency Vermont, helping Vermonters save money by saving energy.
Representative Becca White is a member of the Climate Solutions Caucus, and she serves on the House Transportation Committee. She's young, she's a climate champion, and she's an inspiration. And she's one of us. Please welcome Representative Becca White.
I don't get an intro like that often, so thank you. Wow. I did just want to start. I know we're going to have some recognitions later, but after the gavel fell, we had some other folks join us. We have the Lieutenant Governor, David Zuckerman, who's here with us. And we also have the co-chair of the Climate Caucus, Senator Chris Pearson. I know he's in here somewhere. Well, good afternoon, Vermont Youth Climate Congress. I have to say, normally when I'm in this room, I do not blend in, and I felt like I was the oldest person in the room for most of today. So that makes me feel fabulous. So thank you. It's such a privilege to be here, to be able to speak to you, and I'm so honored to speak to such a group of talented, passionate, innovative, and frankly, brave young people for being here today. As aforementioned, I'm 25, and I do find myself as one of the youngest members of the state legislature. Not the youngest, though. I get beaten out by someone who's 21. And the fact that I serve as a state representative for my hometown, Hartford, Vermont, is pretty rare in the age demographics of the state house that we have today. I actually decided to run for office when I was 20. I had just turned 20, and I just want to ask, how many people are between the ages of 16 and 20? Raise your hand. Okay, you need to start thinking about running for office, okay? You have 4 years to beat me, okay? I'll send a note to the person who does. So I ran for my town select board, which if you live in other parts of the state, there are select boards, there are town councils, there are city councils. But I was motivated to run for office because I was very frustrated and because I was very angry. It took me a while to get to the point of anger and frustration. I spent a lot of time feeling overwhelmed, and I spent a lot of time feeling outnumbered, and I felt burnt out. And that's something to say when you're 20 years old. But I used that anger and that burnout, and what was really fabulous was I got to spend 3 summers canvassing for the Vermont Public Interest Research Group, VPIRG. And it helped me channel those feelings of of being overwhelmed into action. When I knew I was doing something every single day where I was knocking on someone's door, meeting someone new, it felt like every conversation I had was meaningful and important, even the ones where they were short and didn't really want to talk to me. So as I prepared to graduate from the University of Vermont, and shout out to UVM this year, thank you, you rock, I knew that I wanted to do something that made a difference. And I was really questioning whether or not I could, in post-college life, make a difference, or that anything I did would actually matter. So I decided to turn my attentions back to my hometown. And I considered being on the Planning and Zoning Board. Fortunately, I had a mentor and a friend who said, I don't really think you'd be very good on the Planning and Zoning Board. I think you should run for office. And having a mentor and a friend who said that to me propelled me forward because I didn't feel like I was qualified. And I didn't feel like I had the experience to run for office. And I also thought I couldn't afford to run for office. I was told all of those things in less kind words by people in my own community. But at the same time that I felt that I was too immature or unqualified to run for office, I was far too stubborn to not run for office. So I did. I ran. And to my surprise, and to I think everyone else's in the town of Hartford, I was successful and I won. I found a place to channel my anger and that frustration that had been building up to actually move the conversation forward. And if you feel like you have anger or frustration or you're not being listened to, sometimes you have to channel that into running for office or voting or being a part of a committee or showing up to events like this today. At the same time I was serving on the select board, I had a full-time job. I worked for the mission-driven solar company SunCommon, and I was lucky enough to have an employer who valued public service and gave me the flexibility to work around the often hectic meeting schedule. But at the same time, there was this juxtaposition between the conversations I was having when I was talking to Vermonters about going solar, about renewable energy. Those conversations felt starkly different from the conversations I was having with fellow policymakers. While my neighbors and community members were saying, hurry up, we don't have time, we need solutions now, I felt like I was hearing, slow down, we'll get to it, maybe next year. So after 4 years, I turned my attentions to the State House, and because sometimes policymakers are resistant to change, sometimes, if Mitzi Johnson was here.
May I have your attention, please? This is a building evacuation. Gather your belongings if they are within reach. An evacuated building containing a designated route area.
So the building's being evacuated. Everybody, I'll tune in again shortly.
Okay, so I leave this to you. If it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we will have progressive climate change policy. I appreciated the chair of Energy and Technology, Tim Brigley, when he said that to me. Because when you think about the folks who are in this room or now outside, you are going to be in power in the next 20 years. And Vermont has the opportunity to either be leaders when it comes to climate change policy or to be dragged kicking and screaming by your generation in 20 years. So I recommend that you be a present and constant group in the State House. That when you're feeling overwhelmed or outnumbered or the third one was being burned out, that you call Phil Scott and you call your state representative and you email your state senator, because in that moment of feeling overwhelmed and outnumbered, you can channel that anger and that frustration towards something positive. So thank you so much for coming here today. I appreciate everyone's adaptability and resilience.
Hi everyone! So as the building is being swept right now, we're hoping that people who've been chosen to report out from their committees to come up and share with us what you worked on in committee. So if you were chosen to report out, come on up now.
Yes, Dad.
Really loud. Really loud.
Let's just go down the list that we have for the agenda. I believe that transportation report out first, just 1 to 2 minutes.
Okay.
Really loud. Name, school?
I'm Wyatt Hart. I go to Burlington High School, and we decided that so accelerate the deployment of low carbon transportation and heating solutions. Accelerate the development of electric vehicles to make them more affordable and accessible. Immediately invest in and create alternative transportation services such as public transportation, pedestrian connectivity, and biking infrastructure.
I'm John McCarthy from Champlain College. We also made the changes to join regional initiatives aimed at cutting transportation emissions and collecting revenue that can be used to invest in EV renewable infrastructure, as well as to create a 10-year timeline stating that by 2030, we will have banned the sale of passenger vehicles powered by fossil fuels and have implemented extensive public transportation infrastructure.
My name's Seth. I go to Vermont Common School, and I'm the Energy and Home Heating Committee. A couple things. First, we felt like the goal to achieve net zero, that deadline wasn't aggressive enough. So we decided 2032, net zero for Vermont, and then continuing on that, decarbonization by 2040. That's incredibly important to us, so we thought we would put that in. Additionally, we felt like transparency from the government is really important as we go down this road. So we put in a clause to mandate a report by the Agency for Natural Resources every 2 years about our progress towards achieving those goals. In addition, that idea of transparency we kind of got from the Climate Solutions Act. That's an act that's in our legislature that we felt was important, so you can check out that bill too. Lastly, we felt like Efficiency Vermont was a major part of this. We really felt like they're doing great work, so expanding Efficiency Vermont to assist in weatherizing all Vermont buildings. We kind of expanded that to weatherizing all Vermont buildings and pretty much anything that Efficiency Vermont is doing already, just continuing to support them and making sure they're doing it in an equitable way for all Vermonters. Thank you.
My name's Alita Tamara. I'm from Stowe High School. And for the agriculture group, we just came up with a couple of different...
Scream it.
We changed our solutions a little bit, and we talked to some farmers and got their opinions on what they think is necessary. So yeah. My name's Izzy. I also go to Stowe High School. And for the first one, we changed it a little bit and said, we will provide economic incentives and educational support to farmers in the transition to truly regenerative practices that sequester carbon, preserve soil health, and water quality.
Hello everyone, I am Max. My name is Max. I go to Glover Community School. And the second one we also reworded to implement effective forest and agricultural policies that regulate and restore water quality, soil health, ecosystem function, and land resiliency.
Meredith Lickman, and I go to Brattleboro Union High School. And for the climate justice points, we amended 3 of them. The first one initially read, incorporate climate justice into the existing Vermont public school curriculum related to climate change. We added to this and require this to be enforced in grades K through 12. The second one, ban the development of new fossil fuel infrastructure. We also added to this and restrict the expansion or increased incapacity of pre-existing fossil fuel infrastructure. And then for the third one, it originally read, prioritize low-income, rural, indigenous, and frontline communities for critical services. We added critical there and also including but not limited to access to educational facilities for incentives, job training, and transition assistance.
I'm Una Fonti from Virgins Union High School and from the Just Transitions Committee. Just quick thing, what's on the declaration is not what we decided. What I'm reading here is and my phone died. So we're gonna do this from memory, and if anyone else on my committee thinks I forgot something, say something. Our first one was to help Vermont governance, help Vermont local and state governance to address issues brought on by external stress. Our second was to help to strike all subsidies for fossil fuels from the Vermont state tax code, and to reinvest in.
Okay, so the first one was, here we go. It started with integrate resiliency measures into local and statewide planning and governance systems, and to that we added aiding them to absorb stresses and maintain function in the face of external stressors. The second one was eliminate all subsidies and special advantages for the fossil fuel industry from the Vermont tax code. And do you know if we amended that one? I don't believe there was a ton amended to that one.
We added to the tax code one, we added reinvest in renewable technologies that, with consideration to Vermont frontline communities, especially rural communities of color and indigenous communities.
And then we also added 2 of them. We added one that was, one of them was I'm not sure of the exact language, but it was mostly just to make sure that as we move forward, we're being really conscious of our marginalized communities and making sure that as we move forward, we're incorporating them in these decisions. And we also added a second that was that we will have a body that will meet on a regular basis, formed by our government, that will combat these issues and will be representative both of location and different demographics. And the third one was that prioritize creating and funding a comprehensive disaster preparedness plan for Vermont. And do you know if we, I don't know, that was just the People's Assembly one, which you already said. Yeah.
I have the second one written out.
Yeah, please come up.
Yeah!
Sorry about the lack of, really loud.
I've phased out all subsidies and special advantages for the fossil fuel industry from the Vermont tax code with consideration for the diverse economic impacts to all Vermonters while reinvesting the benefits into carbon zero alternatives for heating and transportation.
I'm Willa, I'm from Harwood, and I was the chair of the preamble committee, and we just edited it for grammar and punctuation, so that's it.
Is that everybody?
Yeah,
awesome, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Now we vote as an assembled body. All those in favor of passing the declaration that we created today say aye. 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 All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The official finalized declaration will be emailed to everyone here, so we will all have that. And now we will close our time together out. First, I just want to thank a few people who made today possible. Speaker Mitzi Johnson, Senator President Pro Tempore Tim Ash, Senator Anthony Polina, the Climate Solutions Caucus, Senator Bernie Sanders, all the elected officials here today, Sergeant at Arms Janet Miller, 350 Vermont, Ben & Jerry's, the Harris and Francis Block Foundation, Samsung's Solve for Tomorrow program, 7th Generation, Sun Common, the Sunrise Movement, Vermont chapter of the Sierra Club, Vermont Environmental Education Program, Vermont Natural Resources Council, Vermont Public Interest Research Group, and the Vermont Youth Lobby. Let's give them a huge hand.
And of course, the biggest thank you goes to all of you, because this could not have happened without all of the students and the youth who took their time and their dedication to be here today. Because as we all know, this issue is not just about us, it's about the world and it's about our future. And if we aren't fighting for this now, there isn't another time to do it. So this was a really important day, and our fight starts now. Please join us back when the session begins on January 10th, when we deliver our finalized declaration to all the legislatures in office. And I know that this day kind of took a turn when we had to come outside, and probably a lot of people are cold. I know I am. But I'm glad everyone was able to stick around, and I'm so thankful for all of you.